Hi guys, in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to assemble my Christmas Village large townhouse. I designed this large townhouse along with a church and a small townhouse to create this little Christmas village. You can purchase these separately or as a set of 3, and I'll include links for them below. My small townhouse is about 7.5 inches tall, and this large townhouse is about 9.25 inches tall. All the pieces can be cut on 8.5 by 11 letter size paper, so if you have larger paper like 12 by 12, you can scale all the parts to create a larger townhouse. As with my other 2 buildings, you can create this townhouse in 2 different colors because of the extra window trim pieces. Here I've made one in white with black trim and the other in white with beige trim. Now let's get started by looking at what you'll see when you download your folder. Inside the main folder, you should see 2 more folders labeled like you see here. You'll also notice a PDF file along with these 2 folders, and if you open it up, you'll see this. These are all the parts you'll be cutting out with labels for each of the parts. But this is not the file you'll use for cutting. It's purely informational so that you can see what each of the parts are, which will be particularly helpful if you're cutting different colors. And back to the folders. For those of you who are using a Cricut machine, if you have a scoring tool attachment for your machine, you'll want to use the SVG file in this folder labeled Yes Scoring Tool, so that your scoring tool will make all your fold lines for you. And your file will look like this. Those dashed lines you see here will need to be changed to score lines under the operation menu so that your machine will know to score them to create fold lines like this. I do have a full video that goes into more detail about fold lines that I'll link below, and if you're new to the Cricut machine, I encourage you to watch it because it'll walk you through how to prepare your file if you're using a scoring tool. And if you do not have a scoring tool, you'll be using the SVG file in this folder labeled No Scoring Tool. And that file will look like this. These are the exact same shapes as in the Yes Scoring Tool file, but I've made these a different color for distinction. And the important difference here is that the fold lines you see here will be cut as dashed cut lines like this. And in this case, you do not have to do anything to the file. When you send it to cut, the dashed lines will cut as dashed lines. And if you're using another cutter that's not the Cricut, I'm not sure how the scoring tools work with other machines, so feel free to let me know in the comments. And if you just have a blade and no scoring tool, you can also use the No Scoring Tool folder. Alright, moving on to the assembly. Once you've cut out all your parts, they should look like this. Here is the finished townhouse, and if you've made any of my other 2 buildings, there is one difference with this one. And the difference is with this bottom flap here, which will be attaching to this front panel, and that flap is this part here in the final building. Since I wanted all my Christmas Village buildings to fit on 8.5 by 11 letter size paper, I had to chop off this bottom flap and make it a piece on its own. But we will be reattaching it here later on. And now if we go back to our file, this piece here is that bottom piece. But we'll come back to it later on. Now let's begin by taking our 2 building wall panels, the front piece and the back piece, and setting them out like this. The first thing we will be doing is gluing all our door and window trims, and I'll only be adding trim to the front and side panels. I won't be adding any to the back panel. To help you visualize how these panels will create your final building, first make this fold here. And now you can see how this other panel will attach. And you can make this fold here on the second panel. And these will create your building like this. Next, we'll glue on our trim pieces. For glue in this project, I like to use this tacky glue because it dries faster. It's just not as runny as regular white glue. I'm starting with a window piece and just dabbing glue onto all the corners. You don't need very much here. Then your trim piece should align perfectly with the window cutouts on the building. And in your download, I've multiplied each trim piece to the number that you'll need, so you should have 9 of these window trims in total. And now continue on with the rest of your windows. And the last trim for this panel is this small window. And that's it for the trim on this panel. This front door cutout will be covered by a small front porch like this, which we'll work on later. And here's the back piece for the townhouse. Remember, we're just going to be covering the 2 windows on the side panel of this piece. And that's it for trim for these pieces. Now let's attach them. The first step is to glue on that bottom panel I talked about earlier, and that will go right here. And to do that, we're going to flip over this front panel and now just reinforce these bottom flap folds. So this piece will attach like this, and I'm just going to go ahead and place glue along both of these bottom flaps and do them at the same time. Line that panel right up to the fold line. And then bring your piece up and fold in that side panel and tuck in that bottom flap. Then just press along those flaps to secure your glue. And now right here we want a nice crisp right angle here, so just fold in your fold just to create that nice 90-degree angle. And right at this point is where I realize I forgot to make all my folds on this front panel, so we're going to go ahead and do that right now. And let's make those folds on our back panel piece before we do any more gluing. So all our folds are going to go in the same direction, and that's in towards the center of the building. So folding to the opposite side of where your trim is glued on. And now these 2 pieces will come together like this. And now we'll place some glue on this bottom flap and also the flap of the side panel. You may need to adjust your flap a little bit here, and then we attach the bottom piece like this. Try to match up that corner. And when that piece is secure, you can wrap in your side panel. And here I'm just waiting for my glue to set a little bit, and then you can pick this whole thing up and press those flaps down from underneath. You can also use a tool to reach into the far corners. I'm using the end of a paintbrush here. And I'm just reaching into the corners to make sure the glue is sticking in those corners. And now we can set this aside to dry. While we're waiting for that to dry, let's move on and assemble our porch piece. Here is the porch cutout. And the first thing we do is make some folds. And if you're holding your cutout like this, push the folds away from you like this. I'm just going to make a few folds here so we know where the top face is, and we can make the rest of the folds later. Now with the porch facing up like this, glue on the door and window trims. And while that glue is setting in, we can finish making the rest of our folds. This piece is going to come together like this, so place your glue on this flap. Then bring it in and tuck it behind that back frame. Make sure to push the edge of that back frame right up to the fold line on the flap. Then just press along the glue until it stays together. Let this dry for a few minutes before continuing. Next, we're going to close up this piece. Starting at the bottom, we're going to close this base flap like this. It doesn't matter how these flaps are sitting as long as you spread your glue over all 3 flaps. And now attach the bottom flap and hold that for a few seconds. Next, we are going to glue down these top flaps to create a base for the roof. And to do that, lift these side flaps up and place glue along the edges of the center flap below them. Now before you bring the flaps down, line up the edge of that center flap with this fold line of the side flap. Then press the side flap down. Hold until this no longer comes apart. Then repeat with the other side. And now we have this nice surface to glue on our roof piece like this, but we'll do that later. Next, let's go back to the main building. Here is our building, and we are going to close in the sides, so place glue along the side flap. Try to reach right into that tight corner, and since we've let this dry, you should be able to open up that corner without pulling apart the bottom flap. Then press this corner together. And with this corner, I can easily reach in here to make sure the flap is completely glued down by just running my fingers across it. Now when that seam is done, glue down the other corner. And when you're finished, give this a few minutes to dry. The next step is to glue down those roof flaps, exactly like what we did with the porch piece. Make sure the side flaps are over the center flap. And this flap will glue down like this. Remember, with that center flap aligned with the fold line beside it. And now apply your glue. Hold that together until it's no longer coming apart, then glue down the other 3 flaps. And that's it for the building. Next we glue on our roof. Take your roof piece and fold it in half using the fold line. Next, spread glue all over this surface we just created. And attach your roof piece. And just take a peek underneath to make sure the overhangs on both sides are even, and press down. Here I'm being fussy and using my paintbrush to tighten the seams along the edge. And that's our main building. Now to the final step, attaching the porch. Here is the porch, which is going to be attached right here, so place some glue on that back frame. For extra hold, I'm placing glue around this door frame as well. Then press your porch onto your building. And you can align that roof tip to the center of the window above it. Make sure that when you press this into the building, the 2 bottoms are nice and level. Hold until it no longer feels like it wants to come apart. And take a peek around the back to make sure it looks good. Nothing wonky, and let this dry for a few minutes. And now the final step is to glue on the roof of the porch. And to do that, place glue on that surface we created earlier with these flaps. Then attach your roof, butting it right up against the building. And your large townhouse is done. Now, if you want to place a tea light inside, you can put it in through the back opening. And just a reminder not to use real tea light candles because you will burn your house down. I'll add a link below for these flameless ones. That's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this one. Thanks for following along.